Hi, Rob here. Welcome back to the IELTS Transformation Writing course. This lesson is about the language that's good to use for the writing Task 1 academic. So there's particular things you have to do in here. This lesson is based on the most common mistakes that people make. The language that they don't use that they need to. It's very important. So this comes from most of the mistakes that people make. So we'll be talking about the grammar, how to present data, and what we call hedging language. Hedging language means that you're not being very precise. You're hedging your bets. You're talking about it's not exactly this number. It's about that. Okay, which is important. Let's have a look at the grammar first. So we've got to use the passive voice in the academic Task 1 writing, especially in the process. So what we find is in the process, if people are not very confident with the grammar, well, they make lots of mistakes, or they try to not use the passive. And for example, in the process, it ends up, if it's about food, then it's like a recipe. First you do this and then you do this. But it's not like that. It must be, we're focusing on the thing, the stuff, that's not precise, that is receiving the action. So for example, in this one, this is from an example we use in our other Task 1 academic lessons. The limestone is crushed, the powder is heated, the cement is bagged. So you've got to be good at the passive, okay? Also, the passive is a complex structure. So when you use the passive, that's the kind of language that you need to get to 7 or more. Then we've got comparatives and superlatives. So these really, I think, are essential throughout IELTS. I mean, again, they are considered to be a complex structure. So it's really good for your grammar score to use comparatives and superlatives. We're going to use them in the speaking test, aren't we? Because often the speaking questions are about the difference between this country and your country. Or my country is hotter than Australia, for example. Whatever the example. So useful in the speaking and the writing, in the essay as well. But here, in the Task 1 academic, they're essential because the question says make comparisons where relevant. Well, usually we're comparing, lines on a graph, so it's most often very relevant to use comparatives and superlatives. So good for your grammar throughout, so in speaking and all the writing, essential to help you answer the question in the Task 1 report. For example, Europe had the biggest overall land degradation. More and more students opted for full-time courses. The more people went to university, the higher the costs were. So in these examples, this superlative here, the biggest, is quite a simple one. But this one here, more and more students, a repeating comparative, this is a bit of a higher level really. It's more difficult to use. And then we've got the parallel comparatives when two things are changing at the same time. The more people went to university, the higher the costs were. So that's quite common as well, and very, very useful to use throughout your test. So as with all grammar, try to listen carefully for when these structures are used, and read, of course. Let's have a look at the passive voice. Here's the life cycle of the silkworm from one of the old Cambridge IELTS books. So if we just look here, you can see the verbs are written here, down the side. So the cocoon, here's the cocoon. The cocoon is selected, it is boiled, it is unwound, it is twisted, it is weaved. So don't forget to make the passive voice, it's the be verb plus the past participle. as I say here, there is a separate lesson explaining this in much more detail. That's in the grammar section of this course. But I'm just showing you here, you need to use the passive voice throughout task 1, but especially in the process, because something is receiving a process and action. So now tenses, really in this example here we've got past time, 1980, current time, and then the future. So, but because this information is present in the chart, in the graph, you can use the present simple, actually. So in 1980, petrol and oil is at 35 quadrillion units. In 2030, petrol and oil is at about 48 quadrillion units. So that's okay. You could use the past simple and the future simple as well, and that would be fine. In 1980, petrol and oil was at 35 quadrillion units. In 2030, petrol and oil will be. So both are okay. This second one is more logical, I think, but don't worry too much about it. But yeah, I think it's more logical to talk about, if it talks about the past, then use past tenses. If it's the future, use the future. So how do we present change? This is a big one, because a lot of this task is about change. They have different years, like in the graph before, and you can see how lines on the graph go up and down. So increase, go up, rise, skyrocket. Personally, avoid skyrocket. People don't know how to use it. If it goes up like a rocket, like directly up, okay. Equally, plummet means straight down. So, but the reason I've crossed them out is that people overuse them and they don't know how to use them properly. And you don't really, so if you do that, then you're making mistakes, which loses your marks. So don't do that. So my suggestion is keep it a bit simpler and don't make mistakes. So use increase, go up, rise, decrease, go down, drop, fall. If there's no change, it remain steady, constant, fluctuate. Pretty much that's it. Don't go crazy on this. Better to be correct and safe than take big risks and make mistakes. That's not cool. Doesn't help. So there are different ways we can present change. You can use adjectives. So this is going to help you answer the question because you're describing the change more precisely and more accurately. And also it's going to help your vocabulary score. So for example, there was a huge, enormous, massive, large, big, minimal, small, tiny. So we've gone from the biggest to the smallest, plus a noun. So these adjectives are helping you to describe what's changing. For example, there was a minimal increase in employment. There was a massive change in employment, increase in employment. Also adverbs. Again, I cover this in the grammar section, but adverbs are really, really useful to be more precise here, but also you're getting more points in your grammar, basically. So you can use adverbs of degree to describe change. So unemployment increased hugely, sharply, enormously, massively, minimally, etc. We can also use adverbs of degree to describe the change. So we're going to add these. So for small changes, a little, barely, a bit, slightly, hardly, scarcely. For example, the price has changed a little, or a bit, or slightly. The price is hardly, or scarcely changed. For medium changes, we can use somewhat. The plan changed somewhat. Okay, for big changes, a lot or a great deal is fine. So again, you're getting points for using these adverbs to describe the verbs. And also you're being more accurate. You are summarizing the graph more, don't describe, you're summarizing the graph more precisely, and you're getting a better score in grammar. So good for task achievement, answering the question, good for grammar, okay? Now, as in all academic writing, if you make a statement, you must support it with data. So in this case, in IELTS, you must support your summary of the key features with figures or data which exemplify or show your point. Okay, so let's have a look. There are three main reasons why farming land around the world has had its productivity decreased. They are roughly similar in their effect. So I've made my statement. For example, overgrazing has caused 35% of it, while overcultivation and deforestation are 28% and 38% respectively. Another 7% is caused by other. So when you make a statement, you must support it with data. If you don't do this, you are a band 5 automatically. No data, band 5. How should you present your data? As I mentioned before, unemployment is or was 6% in 1980. Between 1980 and 1992, there was an increase in employment. During the 1980s, there was a sharp increase in employment. So these prepositions here are important to say what was happening from here to here, which is often the case, or during, in that time. We use these prepositions here. Petrol and oil started at 35 quadrillion units. 35% of those surveyed were very satisfied. Okay, so these prepositions are important to help you to describe the data. Unemployment rose from 6% to 8% from here to here. Unemployment doubled from 6 to 12%. Unemployment tripled, times 3, from 6 to 18%. Unemployment halved from 6 to 3%. So you can use these verbs to describe the data. So double is times 2, triple times 3, halved times 0.5. Let's have a look. So there's two ways that you can talk about this. You can use it as a verb, the number halved, or you could say half of the students passed. Unemployment increased by 8%. There was an increase of 8% in unemployment. So using the verb or the noun like this gives you more grammar range. What we get a lot is students who write the same thing. Blah, 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 increased by, da, 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 increased by, da, 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 increased by, well, so increase. Boring. Don't do it. So so that's not a good range. You need to show range in grammar and vocabulary. So try just changing it to the noun or the verb, whichever way. There was an increase. Unemployment increased, there was an increase of 8%. Okay, so that will give you better range, and it also shows flexibility, which is important for a 7 or more. Okay. How can we sequence data? Well, this word respectively helps us to do that. So we're not going to say A is 10%, B is 5%, C is 2%. You can say A, B, and C are 10, 5, and 2% respectively. So it helps us to list. That's what we're doing. We're listing data. And when we have a lot of data, like in many of these task ones, we need to be more efficient with that. Hedging language. So this is really important. What I see a lot, is people will get a ruler and draw a line. I can see them trying to calculate it. They might say, is that 31 or 32? This part here, is that 31 or 32? Well, who cares? It doesn't say precisely. Is petrol and oil at 48, 49, or 50, or 47? Where is it at? Who cares? Use hedging language. So you can say petrol and oil will be around, approximately, roughly 50 quadrillion units. Also, when you're using these are prepositions and these adverbs, you're getting higher points in your vocabulary and grammar. So you don't need to be completely precise. Use this hedging language. Okay, hedge your bets. That will help you to not worry, because you don't need to worry about if it is 40 or 48, 49 or 50. No one cares, so just use hedging language. Or almost and nearly. Yeah, which is just less than. So we could say petrol and oil will be almost or nearly 50 quadrillion units, and that's fine. So we don't need to be precise. Use the adverbs because you get points for them, basically. So watch the other lessons on this. Oops. The grammar lessons are obviously connected to some of those ideas. The academic task 1 lessons explain the whole thing in more detail. It is challenging, the academic task 1, so practice it lots and make sure you get the right advice. A lot of people talk a lot of rubbish about it, to be honest, so make sure you get the right advice. Thank you very much for your time and have a great day.